Welcome to the Money Over 50 podcast, brought to you by Dallas Davison and Michael Hogue from Money Over 50 Financial Advisors. This information is general in nature and does not take into account your objectives, financial situation, or needs. Therefore, you should consider whether the information is appropriate for you and your personal circumstances. If you require personal advice, please contact Money Over 50 Financial Advisors. Here are your hosts, Dallas Davison and Michael Hogue.
Welcome to Money Over 50 with Dallas and Michael. Today we're here to talk about why not 45? Why money over 50? Why not money over 45?
Thanks, Michael.
Why can't you be a client if you're under 50 years of age is what we're here to talk about.
I've got to give credit to my wife, Nicola, for this, because I often, when we're due to record some podcasts, I'll often say, you got any ideas for things that you think we should talk about or that people might be interested in? And this was her idea. She goes, why 50? Why not 45? What's magic about the age 50? And so today, I guess a couple of things that I wanted to talk about is, firstly, why we find 50 is that age when it works best as a rule for people to really start focusing on their retirement. And secondly, if you are 45 and if you're maybe not in a position to quite get really serious about your retirement planning, what are the things that you can do now to get yourself set up so that in 5 years' time, when you are 50 and you make the call to money over 50 and say, right, I'm ready to go, I'm ready to get serious here, you've got yourself set up so that you're in the best position possible. So firstly, I guess to go through why 50, and really this was trial and error from us, wasn't it? That we obviously, for anyone who's listened to the podcast for an extended period of time, in the early years of our business, we did work with everyone of all ages and stages, and it's really only the last 6-7 years now that we've just focused on people 50 and over. And the reason we found that it was a part of the least resistance thing where when you're talking to people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, what we've found is it was very hard for them to stick to a plan for a number of different reasons. Number one being that their life tends to change a lot more, and what they want tends to change a lot more, and their situation changes a lot more. And so it's hard to build a long-term plan around that. And secondly, I think my thing is, for a lot of people, when you're 25, 65 is a long way away. So why bother sticking to a long-term plan, and why not just enjoy yourself and worry about it later on? And that's what tends to happen.
Yeah, you're right. And there's so many variables, and it's such a long trajectory that you can't, if someone's blowing all their money at 25, you can't actually sit down with them and say that you won't have a successful retirement.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, when someone's 50 and they have a shorter runway of only 15 years, it's a lot easier to look at the scenario and say, okay, well, you need to do this, and this. And we sort of, if we get started today, it's going to be a lot easier. It's a lot easier then to work out that with that shorter runway, not much can go wrong on a short runway takeoff. And I'm not a... I don't know how this I don't know how this became a aeronautical analogy, because I know nothing about
planes. That's a very poor analogy. I imagine that a very short runway, there's a lot that can go wrong. So.
Oh no, my point is that you can't afford for anything to go wrong on a short runway.
Gotcha. I thought you were saying a short runway is better. I was going,
I've seen planes take off on aircraft carriers on a really short runway, and you don't want anything to go wrong.
Have you heard the joke about the two Irish pilots that they're about to come in at land, and one of them says, "Geez, have you ever seen a runway that short? What are we going to do?" It's right. Well, when we land, you put on I'll put the brakes on as much as possible. You put on the reverse thrusters. We've got it. So they make this big crash landing, jam everything into reverse, pull it up, and they go, "Geez, that was tough. I can't believe we managed to pull up." And that's definitely the shortest runway I've ever seen. And they look out the one window and go, "But look how wide it is." So they've landed on it the wrong way, basically. That's a very, very poor joke to make.
So I mean, in all seriousness, it's a lot easier to make calculations.
Yes.
And look, I think something clicks when people turn 50. and it's very, very hard for people to, I guess, consciously admit that.
Yeah.
But for new people approaching us, there's usually been some sort of trigger, and that trigger tends to be an age-related trigger.
Yeah.
So they've either turned 50 and went, we have a feeling, a subconscious feeling here now that we need to really get cracking on our retirement, or they've turned 55 and they have we only have 10 years to go feeling towards traditional retirement age of age 65. So
it is.
I mean, I'm 46 right now, so I know a lot of 46-year-olds and 45-year-olds.
Yeah,
and there are a limited few who are in a better position.
Yeah,
and are thinking ahead about retirement.
Yeah,
and some of those people are clients, but the rest of them, they're just not there yet.
No,
there's so many other things to worry about, and they're worried about they're worried about an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old, and I'm a father at 46. I'm a father of a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, so I'm a late starter.
Yeah,
and I know it's very distracting, and I can understand. I can understand why people, besides the point that they're just not in the headspace.
Yeah,
they're paying for the children. They're paying for activities. Usually, one of the partners, one of the members of the couple, is still only working 3 days a week.
Yeah,
because of all the running around and so forth. So
I reckon that. So I guess to summarise what you've just said there, Michael, which I think has covered pretty much everything, is that there's two components. There's the headspace thing, which is that when you're 45, you're scrambling to get kids off to school and to worried about paying off the mortgage, for example. So mentally, you're not in the headspace where you're thinking about retirement because you've just got so many other things that you're thinking about and worried about. And then, secondly, logistically, even if you were worried about your retirement, it's probably you really often don't have the spare cash flow to do anything about it anyway. So the human mind is pretty good at going, there's a thing that I'm worried about here. Oh, I can't do anything about that. I'll put the rock back down on top of those squiggly things and go and think about something else because I can't do anything about that right now. So it's definitely not. To me, I think that it makes sense. It's a perfectly sensible behavioural way of thinking about it. If you're 45 and you've got kids that are going to school, and you're paying all the school fees, and you're just normally getting through the mortgage a fair bit, and you're so busy with kids with extracurriculars and your own stuff, and kids not quite independent yet, all that sort of thing. You just don't have that. You don't have the mental energy to go and start paying for retirement. And even if you do have the mental energy, you probably don't have the cash flow to make a huge difference anyway. So.
Yeah, and there are people that are in their 40s that are clients of ours, and so it's not a hard and fast rule.
No.
But the people that come to us, say at 45, it's clear that they're just in such a better position than their peers around the same age, and it's because they've had that. It's because they've had that mentality since they're probably 25.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So it stands out almost instantaneously.
Yeah.
By looking at their net position.
Yep.
And this isn't a net worth thing. This isn't us saying we're only taking on people in that age range that are in a high net worth, but you can tell instantaneously by looking at numbers and their assets and liabilities that they've had this approach.
Yeah.
That they've been worried about getting ahead, or been worried about their retirement since they were probably in the early 20s.
And
I
can say this because I'm 31.
You're one of those people.
I'm one of those people who's 31 and feel like I'm 101 at times, and I think about
you look 101 from across the side of the podcast booth. Yeah.
So I think you're dead right. It's not to say that there's a net worth thing and that you're better off. You only want clients who've got money. It's that. If someone's 45 and they've got a $300,000 mortgage and 2 kids at school, they're probably not in the headspace to think about their retirement anyway, because they're just focused on, we've got to keep paying the mortgage off and we've got not much cash in the bank because it's all going out in school fees. Whereas if you've got a 45-year-old that's got the mortgage is paid down to $100,000 and the kids are sort of almost off their hands, it's generally because they've started young, either with their family or just with their sort of planning, and they've been thinking about the future already. So for those sorts of people, I'd almost think they're kind of a 55-year-old trapped in a 45-year-old.
They are, body, yeah. They're certainly outliers in terms of their age. And the other people. So since we changed our business name to Money Over 50 Financial Advisors, I've had loads of people say, "Oh, what? I can't be a member of your club," and because I'm only 45. They say it a little bit tongue in cheek, but it's almost like they're offended.
Yeah.
And I say to them, "Look, you're almost certain to be eligible one day. It's not too far down the road that you'll become eligible.
Yes.
If you really, really, really want to be a member right now, let's have a talk. Yeah. And we'll see if we can do anything with you.
Yeah.
Most of the time, though, we're saying with those people, just focus on paying your mortgage down over the next 5 years and get it to that position where it's gone from 300 to 150 or something like that over the next 5 years. So really, really attack that to put you in the position that you can actually take advantage of in from age 50 on. Yeah,
and so I think that's exactly how I'd approach as well. Is that if you are 45 and you'd be only too happy to have a conversation with you about what's your situation and are you actually a bit ahead of the curve there, and could you get started on your retirement planning just 5 years early, or like you say, in most cases that's not the case, and even if you want to, there's probably just enough other things that you're worried about and focused on. So for those types of people, you've just touched on the main one there that I think. So if someone is 45 and they're listening to this and they go, well, I want to get started on my retirement planning, but I know that I'm just not in the headspace for it right now, and I'm not quite where I really need to be in order to make that that big 10 or 15 year push. Is that the main thing that you'd say to focus on in that next 5 years from 45 to 50 is just play into that mortgage as much as possible?
Yeah, look, you could do that. You can stress test things as well. So you could say, okay, well, I assume that from 50 on, I want to contribute a lot of money to superannuation.
Yeah.
Don't know if I can really afford it right now, and I want the option to, if I can't afford it, to basically pull it back.
Yeah.
So they could set up an investment, for example, and actually add a regular amount into that. Yeah. They could do that with their mortgage. They could pay that off their mortgage.
That's a good example, I think, of one like that stress testing where someone who comes to see us at 50 and says, right, well, I've been spending $100,000 a year, but I know I want to start making extra super contributions, and so to do that, I'm going to have to save, net after tax of say $20,000 a year. It's a big adjustment. It's a big change there. So I think that stress testing is a great example of one where even if it's getting paid off your mortgage rather than going into super, if you can get into the habit of just dialing that up, or even, for example, if every time you get a pay rise, rather than just let that sort of be chewed up in your lifestyle, try and have any increases in pay, any tax refunds, anything like that, have all of that go off your mortgage so that when you get to that 50 mark, or when you get to the stage where you are ready to really get started, your lifestyle hasn't expanded to take up all of your income, and you've been able to squeeze that down a little bit. And that, because that's really the main thing for us when people come to see us for the first time, is that if there is that spare cash flow, and if their lifestyle is not chewing up all of their income, there's normally, like we've said before in this podcast, there's a lot that you can do in that last 10 years. But when someone's coming in and they're spending every dollar they earn, you're fairly limited as to how many levers you can sort of pull there. So.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not to say don't put money into superannuation. So if you are in your 40s and it would be still a great thing to be able to do.
Yeah.
And it could be as simple as we've done a podcast on go through your regular direct debits every year. Cull 5 things that's coming out of your credit card on a monthly basis, and add that up. If it adds up to $150 a month, set up a direct debit of $150 a month straight into your superannuation fund, and keep refining that. So keep doing that. So as you cull things out of your budget, you can ramp that up. So it's not to say don't do that.
No.
it's if you're ready, if you're in your 40s now and you're ready to get cracking, certainly it's a good time to start.
It's always better, it's the old my old coach's favourite saying of, the best time to start was 5 years ago, but right now will do.
Will do, yeah.
And that's
good saying.
That's the kind of thing where if you are 45 if you're 45 and you think that you do meet the criteria of, kids are sort of kids are fairly independent, you're on top of the mortgage, you really do have a bit of spare cash flow, and you're in the headspace where you are thinking about retirement, then feel free to give us a call and we can have a look at whether you really do fit the bill there. But as you say, any of those small changes over the next 5 years are going to make a big difference. So just, refining that budget and taking that spare money and either dumping it into super or dumping it in your mortgage, it's going to make a big difference over the next 5 years, both in terms of the position that it puts you in, but also in terms of your habits that you're building over that time and the routines that you get into that then make that shift at 50 much easier. It's not a huge shock to the system. The only other thing that I can sort of think of is that which everyone can do at any age is looking at the investment strategy of your superannuation fund and just looking at whether it's right for you, given that you've probably got, if you're 45, you've got a long time to go until you're retired. Depending on how that's invested, you may be overweight to defensive assets. You could potentially be more invested in growth assets, but ASIC, if you're listening to this isn't personal advice. The whole thing's general advice, but it's just another thing that you could start to think about.
Yeah, it's one of those. It's a consideration. Absolutely, it's a consideration that would be high on your priorities.
And it's a good. I think some of those things, like you were just saying, with you're really just trying to pick up the low hanging fruit in those 5 years. Where if you're not in the space to really make those big changes, it's really just how can you pick up a bit of that low hanging fruit, do the things that are less pain for the best bang for your buck, really, and then get yourself in a position where when you are mentally ready to really put the foot down and have that last 10-year burst of accumulating what you need to be for retirement, then you've done everything possible to set yourself up for that.
Yep. Thanks for the topic, Nicola Davison. But money over 45 just does not have the same ring as money over 50. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Money Over 50 podcast with Money Over 50 Financial Advisors. We look forward to catching up again soon.